It's great to be here with you, Amy. I'm
Hi,
psyched.
Jane. Thanks so much. What a topic we have today.
hmm hmm Imposter syndrome. And there was a recent article in the Harvard Business Review called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome by Rushika Tushayan and Jodi Ann Burry.
Yeah.
And let me just give a little tiny synopsis of this article, and then Amy and I have different opinions, and it's exciting. We want to stir you up.
Yeah. Just a
So,
conversation, right? Start
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about looking at all sides of this. Yeah.
yeah. So, here's the synopsis of the article. Imposter syndrome, or doubting your ability and feeling like a fraud at work, is a diagnosis often given to women. But the fact that it's considered a diagnosis at all is problematic. The concept, whose development in the 1970s excluded the effects of systemic racism, classism, xenophobia, and other biases, namely, I'd add misogyny, took a fairly universal feeling of discomfort, second guessing, and mild anxiety in the workplace and pathologized it. It made it a pathology. It's like, this is a sickness, especially for women. The answer to overcoming imposter syndrome is not to fix individuals, but to create an environment that fosters a number of different leadership styles and where diversity of racial, ethnic, and gender identities is viewed as just as professional as the current model, current with air quotes.
Yeah.
So those are my own air quotes added. So what do you think about the phrase imposter syndrome?
So it's interesting after reading this article, it really helped me pause for a second and say, is it a syndrome or should we call it something else? And I think you brought up some really great thoughts on, syndrome. Will you share I want to talk about imposter syndrome in general, but let's just go right after that word syndrome right now. Cause I think
Sure.
there's some hot energy around that.
Yeah, I think that by calling it a syndrome, we're just turning up the negative self-talk. I think
Mm,
that using the word syndrome gives the impression that the individuals who are experiencing it are patients suffering from some kind of sickness or disease, imposter syndrome. It
mm.
puts the blame on individuals, which I don't know. I don't want to blame those
Well,
individuals. What do you
here's where
think?
we need to look at that, right? So great in this article is talking about that um imposter syndrome. If I was to define imposter syndrome, it's the thing where somebody walks around thinking they have everybody fooled in the work that they're doing or how they're mothering or partnering or whatever it is, that the reality of what's really happening for them is different than the reality of somebody else looking at them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like to say that it's not that imposter syndrome affects whether you aim and shoot at something, a goal that you want or creating a goal, but I think that it affects how high you try to go or how
Ah,
big of a dream or
interesting.
how big of a goal. And I think it's almost this thing that is designed to minimize and make you smaller. And so this article was great because it really reminded me that in the 70s, we were not talking about biases and we were not talking
Mm-hmm.
about exclusion. And those two exacerbate any kind of feeling of doubt, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And very much imposter syndrome is very much about doubt. And so I love that this article brought that up. But I'm challenged with the idea that there could be a white upper class privileged female who it does feel like they are faking it, and that's they don't have the history or the environment that they were raised in of bias, of although we have to say that gender bias is absolutely really strong. What in this article specifically we're really looking at is often race and then demographics of upbringing and things like that. So I think there's something, I love the word imposter because I think it's important for us to be like, I'm pretending or I'm feeling like I'm pretending in my life. And I think that's important for people to know that one, if they feel that way, they don't have to feel that way. There's ways to work through that. Who gave that to them, whether it was society, whether it was their own parents, or whether it was internal. I don't want to beat that up or debate that. I'm just saying, my job as a coach is, okay, you feel that way. How do we move you forward? But the syndrome thing really made me think about, maybe I should start calling it imposter phenomenon. Or, I mean, you're an incredible writer. What words are coming up for you around? Is there a whole other way? And maybe it's not even using the term imposter. Is there something that's coming up for you?
Well, I think that imposter is also really charged, because if somebody is calling you an imposter, even if you're calling yourself an imposter, you are calling yourself a liar.
Oh,
and that doesn't feel very good. I think that,
and yet we are lying to ourselves at times about our abilities, right? But I hear you. We want to be super aware just about, if we're trying to move people forward, tagging liar, liar, pants on fire isn't really
dial
gonna,
911.
Yeah.
Well, it's some of the language around this difficulty, second guessing, feelings of discomfort, anxiety about the workplace. These things have a couple implications. One is that it's something that you really care about, which is important. And it's like, okay, imposter syndrome might have a positive spin. There might be something that we can take out of this. Like, I really care about this, and I wonder if I'm good enough to do it. Go to the first part of that sentence. I really care about this. This is important. So there's that. And when you call it like second guessing or general anxiety about your position or your role, it sort of softens it. It becomes a little wishy-washy. Whereas imposter, I don't know, I don't love it, but I think that it's accurate. And I think that it gives it the punch and the importance that it should have.
Yeah. It is, no matter where it's coming from. And you had so beautifully talked about that prior to our discussion, on this article, is that it has to come to be able to rid the world of this phenomenon. It has to start from the bottom and the top and all sides, and everybody's involved in this. And just even having this conversation, it's about this awareness of that a version of this could exist for so many humans and potentially women as well. And that at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to realize in this day and age that, well, let me back up. I like to say that a lot of people think they have people fooled. Like, oh, I have my boss fooled, that, I'm really good at this. And I'm like, at this day and age, it's unless you have an Oscar, you're not acting, you're not pretending or playing this huge role that's so far from who you are. This is who you are. And you don't have anybody fooled. You may have discomfort, you may have challenges. And I hope that you have an opportunity to have a conversation about what those challenges are, those opportunities, things to grow and advance, what you're feeling. But, and great opportunity to work with a coach through that. But it's one of those things where it does exist. And what do we do with it? And I think, moving forward, we're going to have conversations about whatever we want to call this, imposter phenomenon, imposteritis. Not sure, what do we want?
I like imposteritis.
What do we want to call this, right? But I think
put a cream on it.
There's this discussion of how do we move forward from it? Because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, no matter how we got it, which still needs to be addressed, we need to look at why are we having these feelings and how can we move forward so that we can start to put some of those feelings down on the side of the road. Don't bring them with us.
Yeah. Thinking about top down, bottom up, sideways in, however we're approaching this, the only, at the end of the day, the only thing we have control over is ourselves.
Yeah.
So gaining some objectivity in the face of imposteritis is, if you think of it this way, this organization wouldn't hire me and pay me $100,000 a year if they didn't think I could do it, because they're not in the business of throwing money away.
No, no. Oh, Jane,
Right.
this is so important that I think those people that think they have in some way won an Oscar and landed this role and they should never been hired for it. Companies are not that dumb.
Yeah.
They're just not. You do not have them that fooled. But I do think that it's information that if we're feeling this way, what is it that we need to do? What's the story we're telling ourselves? How do we move forward from this so that it doesn't keep us from playing small and
Yeah.
staying in a less than sort of situation in our lives?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actionable data, right? This
I
is
love it.
something, when we know this about ourselves, when we know this about ourselves, we can do something about it.
We
And
can.
I think that, and this is the bottom up kind of thing, and I love the grassroots bottom up sort of approach to everything because we only have control over ourselves. So the more of us who address imposterism, imposteritis, imposter phenomenon, the more of us who address it, the I think the more often it will be dispelled within ourselves and also within our employers.
Mm.
And the social context that makes us, I love how I just keep squishing, here's the glass ceiling, it's coming down.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah. Love it. Love it. Bring it
yeah,
down. Bring it down.
yeah. So the more we address it as individuals, the the more impact we'll have on our own social context. So I'm excited to think about it in different ways and get the conversation moving and
Well, this article
empowering
definitely
people.
got the conversation moving,
Mhm.
for me who has used the term imposter syndrome, thousands of times in the last 10 years. This is going to make me think a little bit differently about that and also think about what the environment is this client is coming with and from and the aspects of that, right? Really great statement of if I could, I would. So as a statement like this, if I could feel like I don't have imposter syndrome, I would, but I don't know how
Yeah,
to do that, right? Well,
right.
part of that is doing some of that me search and that self-reflection and then working with whether it is a therapist, depending on the level of this and
Mhm.
the heaviness of that imposter syndrome, or potentially a coach where it is you have this phenomenon and it is truly not a syndrome, but it is still you taste it in your mouth every morning when you look in the mirror and go off to work.
Yeah.
How do we move forward from this? What are the truths? What can we do? So I think that's going to come up. It'll be really fun to see some of the conversations that happen from this.
Mhm.
Um, and off we go with it. Jane, this has been so important for us to just kick around a little bit. And I know we're going to do this more, not only on this topic, but also on others. Um, what's the action? What's the step that people should take next?
I think that, well, what do you think? Observe, reflect, become self-aware.
We
What do
want to
you think?
know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, do you experience imposter syndrome yourself? And think about it. Uh, is this something that's happening that you are causing? Is it something that's coming to you externally?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting and fascinating awareness that I think that we as professional women can learn from. We can act. This is data, this is information
Yeah.
that we can use to move forward.
So
So
as Jane said, we want to know what you think about imposter syndrome, the term, And if it's happening for you, how is it happening? Let's share some, let's start a conversation. Thanks, Jane, for helping us do that.
Very good. Thanks.